Indiana Newsdesk is made possible in part by Smithville Fiber Internet, streaming TV, home security and automation in Southern Indiana. More information at smithville.com. Maller Grodner Attorneys, providing legal services to clients and the community. Understanding, expertise, results. Bloomington and Indianapolis. LawMG.com. IU Alumni Association, connecting IU's network of alumni and sharing the Indiana spirit through scholarships, advocacy, and volunteerism. alumni.iu.edu. IU Center for Rural Engagement, extending IU Bloomington resources to improve Hoosier lives in partnership with communities and organizations. rural.indiana.edu. And by WTIU members. Thank you.
Coming up on Indiana Newsdesk, area nonprofits have received nearly $400,000 in CARES pandemic relief funding from the federal government.
In all my years in working in the nonprofit field, I've never seen a package like this for the pandemic, for the CARES Act.
Some of the money has gone to fixing up offices and buying new equipment. Federal student loan borrowers can now apply for President Biden's one-time loan cancellation program, but in Indiana, any relief money will be taxed.
The advice we give to people is to file on time and pay as much as you can by the deadline.
Borrowers have until the end of 2023 to apply. And we sit down with the three candidates looking to succeed Republican Trey Hollingsworth in Indiana's redrawn 9th Congressional District. We'll have these stories, plus the latest news from across the state, right now on Indiana Newsdesk. Welcome to Indiana Newsdesk. I'm Joe Wren. This week, those with federal student loan debt became eligible to apply for President Biden's one-time student loan cancellation. But as Indiana Public Broadcasting's Violet Cumber-Weiland reports, advocates are urging borrowers to prepare for the likely tax implications from loan forgiveness.
Indiana is one of 4 states that taxes student loan forgiveness, including Biden's recent one-time cancellation. Andy Nielsen is a senior policy analyst for the Indiana Community Action Poverty Institute. He says borrowers should be aware of any state and local taxes on their loans. Hoosiers may be vulnerable to penalties if they owe more than a certain threshold on these taxes.
If you live in a county, right, that a higher local income tax, and you get above that $1,000 threshold, you may start being subject to underpayment penalties by the Indiana Department of Revenue.
Andrew Van Singel of IRS urges borrowers need to keep receipts of their payments and correspondence with loan servicers.
You have to be your best advocate. You have to be diligent, keep documentation. You may need to, down the road, prove that payments were made or conversations were had.
Nielsen adds making small payments to avoid going over this threshold are better than no payments. For Indiana Public Broadcasting, I'm Violet Cumber-Weiland.
The deadline to apply for Biden's one-time loan cancellation will be December 31st, 2023. 20 area nonprofits are making use of nearly $400,000 of CARES funding made available this fall through the South Central Community Action Program. As Benta Boutier reports, the aid is welcome as groups continue to meet increases in community need for services.
Inside New Hope for Families on Morton Street, kids in early learning programs play or lay down for a nap. The center's executive director, Emily Pike, says the federal aid that came through SCAP helped pay for basic operations.
People love to buy toys for us and things like that, but sometimes we need, much more basic things.
SCAP allocated $10,000 of federal relief to New Hope in September. The shelter used the money to buy a lawnmower and acoustic panels.
So in our old spaces, we just had a couple of push mowers, which made sense for what we were doing. We got a lot more space to mow out here.
The panels help soundproof offices and housing areas.
When we moved into the new space, we realized that some of our conference rooms sound carries too much. And so we were worried about the confidentiality of those rooms.
Pike says working with SCAP made the process of spending the money easier and less time-consuming. SCAP is also a nonprofit, so Pike said she didn't have to explain the need for basics and didn't have to go through a lengthy grant process. SCAP got about $580,000 of the $2.2 trillion CARES money to distribute. Some of that was spent earlier on SCAP operations and community needs. The remaining $400,000 is what got distributed.
So in all my years in working in the nonprofit field, I've never seen a package like this for the pandemic, for the CARES Act money.
A University of San Diego report says nonprofits see increased demand for services during national crisis.
Since the pandemic is that there are new people that haven't struggled before that are now struggling. People that did not expect to be in poverty, living with poverty.
Ryu added the ability to fill a need for local service providers was a good way to touch base and look to the future.
In talking to other community leaders, I feel like there's an energy to want to collaborate, to want to help those that we've been serving for years.
Girls Inc. of Monroe County received $20,000. Director of Operations Marissa Churchill says the money allowed them to make bigger purchases, like a refrigerator, that they'd been putting off. They also bought items to create a calm room for their facility.
Because all kids need a lot of love and attention and just TLC because their emotions are quite large right now.
It also put more resources into providing health programs.
We put on our list backup clothes, training bras, socks, underwear, toothbrushes, toothpaste, anything for their health essential for them to feel comfortable in this space if they were to ever need such items.
Pike and Rio both expressed the need for investment in infrastructure to support nonprofits and say they'll be watching for more nonpartisan action at the federal level.
But investments in the human resources that it takes to run these sorts of services, and investments in the very boring things that you need to make a building work. And those can be hard because that money gets spent and then you will need to do it again.
Nationally, the largest allocations of CARES money went to individuals, large corporations, and small businesses.
In those early pandemic days, those were not moments when friends and family felt safe opening their home to other people. And so we found more families who didn't have another option.
For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Ben Taboutier.
Terre Haute Mayor Duke Bennett says the city budget is facing the biggest impact ever from the state's tax cap law. Now, Indiana limits the taxes local governments can collect on property. And Bennett says that means the city will have to forego $15 million in additional tax dollars, which would have helped fund its $105 million budget.
Well, we get about $25 million a year in property tax revenue. So for all of our funds that get property taxes. If you had that extra 15 million, you'd have $40 million you're collecting.
Terre Haute was hit hard by the 2010 tax caps and took years to eliminate a multi-million-dollar deficit. Still, Bennett says 2023 is the city's 8th straight year of having a balanced budget. It includes 4% employee raises and more funds for fuel and utility costs. A Bloomington man made headlines last month for vandalizing the Washington Monument with paint. Now he says he's dying on the streets of D.C. waiting for sentencing. 44-year-old Sean Ray Deaton says he has a terminal diagnosis of Crohn's disease and other complications and says his actions were a last chance appeal for help.
Die quietly out of the way is kind of the roundabout way I've heard from almost everyone. If you're nothing, have no power, no connections, no money, then you have to get attention somehow.
Deaton pled guilty Monday to destruction of government property. A D.C. Circuit Court is considering 4 to 10 months incarceration and a fine between $2,000 and $20,000. Coming up next on Indiana Newsdesk.
Our Holden Absher sits down with the 3 candidates vying for Indiana's 9th District congressional seat in next month's midterm election. They share their views on election security, abortion, the Second Amendment, and more.
These stories and more right here on Indiana Newsdesk.
Public television's mission is to create a more informed and engaged public with inspiring programs, compelling stories, and trustworthy news. And we can't do it without a team of professional journalists, media specialists, engineers, and administrators making it happen both on the air and behind the scenes. Want to work for WTIU? Find the latest job postings on our website, Details at WTIU.org/jobs.
Life is full of choices, and right now your favorite member benefit, Passport, is offering more choices for you to stream.
Welcome to the club.
It's a beautiful thing. With cooking.
Gotta let it cook, but I keep wanting to smell it.
Travel.
And here we are.
Oh, yeah!
Documentaries.
I realized I could change the world.
And so much more. The choice is yours with Passport on the PBS Video app.
Welcome back to Indiana Newsdesk. Indiana's 9th Congressional District will have a new representative next year as Republican Trey Hollingsworth isn't seeking re-election. Our Holden Absher sat down with each of the candidates running for the district and is here to share their stories. Welcome back, Holden.
Thank you, Joe. District 9 will not only have a new representative in the next session, it'll look a lot different than it did when Hollingsworth won the seat in 2020. The district has 17 1/3 counties, and it used to connect the Louisville area to Bloomington, but now it forms more of a triangle between Bloomington, Louisville, and Cincinnati. I talked last week with the 3 candidates vying for the seat: Republican former state Senator Aaron Houchin, Democrat Matt Fife, and Libertarian Tanya Millis on a number of topics ranging from inflation to abortion to guns. And first up is my interview with Salem's Aaron Houchin. She won a crowded primary in May by more than 6,000 votes, and after failing to secure the nomination in 2020. She's also a small business owner who's pro-gun and pro-life. What makes you the right candidate for the 9th District?
I think in this environment in particular, when I'm out and about talking to voters, they're asking for a check and balance on this administration. So I certainly fit that profile to be a check and balance. And I'm also known as a fighter, not just on partisan issues, but all issues like the broadband initiative that we worked on. I've worked on dyslexia screening, helping children in foster care. There's plenty of issues that we've worked on that are nonpartisan that just take a lot of hard work, and we certainly fit that bill.
I want to turn now to some more issue-specific questions and some of your policy stances. Let's start with abortion, the topic of the summer mostly. Can you give me your thoughts on overturning of Roe v. Wade? And do you think abortion is a national issue that Congress should address?
Well, I'm pro-life, and I haven't shied away from that in my service in the state legislature. I do think that the decision to overturn Roe v. Wade and send it back to the states was the correct one. I think the government closest to the people is best. There is a role for the federal government. We've got things like the Hyde Amendment and other things that the federal government does weigh in. In general, though, I'm a federalist that believes that states make the best government, and the best government is closest to the people.
I know you weren't in the legislature at the time of the special session, but do you have any thoughts, or do you support Indiana's near total abortion ban?
Well, I wouldn't categorize it as a near total abortion ban, but you know, the Republicans on this issue don't have a radical position. The radical position has been held by Democrats in Congress that have voted for abortion all the way up to the 9th month of pregnancy. I think that Senate Bill 1 struck a balance as it was finally ended, and I would have voted for that legislation.
Do you feel that in Indiana or in the United States we need to do a better job to protect or to secure our elections?
Yeah, I had some legislation on this issue. It was absentee ballot security. We ended up passing legislation that did require voter ID for absentee ballots when they're asked for online. I think we could continue to secure our elections by requiring voter ID for all types of voting. We do have it for in-person voting. We have had that for many years. We most recently have it for absentee ballot voting online, online requests. And I think we could also strengthen our security by requiring voter identification for absentee ballots applications by mail.
Looking at the 2020 election, do you believe Joe Biden is the rightfully elected president?
I think there were some irregularities. I think during COVID we made some changes. Secretaries of states, governors, they made changes to election laws that certainly were not constitutional. But we did have that election certified. I don't think that we should relitigate the past. We should just make sure that the elections moving forward, that the public has confidence and faith that they are the outcome that is established.
Turning now to the Second Amendment, some statistics from the Gun Violence Archive. They've reported that this year there have been 519 mass shootings, more than 1,200 accidental shootings, more than 1,000 children or teenagers were killed this year. More than half of the gun deaths were suicide. Do you think America has a problem with gun violence, and how might we address these issues?
I think we have a problem with soft on crime policies that end up contributing to these things. We have had prosecutors that aren't prosecuting many cases. We have programs or initiatives to defund the police. So we have had a problem with being soft on crime and not holding people accountable. I think that certainly contributes to the violence that we see in the country, and we should focus on those efforts to support the police and to encourage our prosecutors to follow the law and prosecute criminals when they commit violent acts.
Houchin's primary had 9 people vying for the Republican nomination, but Democrat Matt Fife's field wasn't as crowded with only 3 contestants. He's a math teacher from Bloomington who won his primary by almost 6,000 votes. He's a strong proponent for education and women's rights. How did you get involved in politics?
When my first year teaching, we were told that we had to raise test scores, otherwise we'd all get fired. And we did it, which was a policy success, right? But we did it at the expense of music classes. We spent money on calculators, tens of thousands of dollars. And we cut things like credit card units that actually gave students what I think would be really valuable knowledge after high school. And that policy success didn't feel like a success for students to me. And I think that got me on the path interested in politics in general and these policies that don't seem to be written for everyday people.
If you were elected, what single issue or topic might rise to the top of your agenda?
So I'm going to answer that in 2 ways. If I could wave a magic wand, it would be campaign finance reform. It would be reform in government in general. So by getting better people there to begin with, ranked choice voting, making sure that our politicians aren't trading stocks, that sort of thing that keeps good people there, we're going to get better policies across the board. My personal interest is education and labor policy, so I think I'd sit on the Committee of Education and Labor. So helping working class folks, wages, retirement, good benefits, and then making sure we have great schools.
I do want to turn and talk about a couple issue-specific topics, and most of them are more recent and in the news. First one, kind of the topic of the whole summer, abortion. Yeah. Can you give me your thoughts on the overturning of Roe v. Wade? And do you think abortion is an issue that should be addressed by Congress at the national level?
I do. It doesn't make sense to me that geography is about to determine your health care. It scares me that some states are going to total abortion bans, that some states are not allowing victims who have been raped to get abortions. This sort of care is, especially in Indiana where we already have high infant and maternal mortality rates, is going to eventually hurt folks. And I've heard this from people across the district that they're angry about this, right? This decision and this reversal in taking away their rights. I talked to a woman in Scottsburg, Indiana. She's 21. She's never voted before. She has 1 child and she's pregnant and has another one on the way. And she looked at me in the eye and just said, I'm scared that if this bill passes and I have a complication, I'm going to leave my 1-year-old child behind, motherless. And those are the type of stories that get me. And those are the type of stories that I don't need our government telling our medical professionals when it is okay to provide care or not. They're gonna muck up the system that's adding an extra layer and it's making it unsafe for our families. And at the end of the day, I think we need to codify Roe federally.
Now, complete change over looking at the Second Amendment now. Sure. A couple statistics I have here from the Gun Violence Archives. Yeah. 519, and these might be outdated, these are as of Thursday. 519 mass shootings, more than 1,200 accidental shootings, more than 1,000 children or teenagers killed in 2022. More than half of the gun deaths have been suicide. Do you think that America has a problem with gun violence?
Unfortunately, yes. I mean, there's a problem with violence to begin with, and guns are easily accessible for many Americans who have, whether it be violent tendencies, mental illness. I grew up here in Indiana. I grew up in rural Indiana. We had guns in our house. Our neighbors had guns. Some of them use them to hunt. Some of them use them for personal protection. but they use them safely, they store them safely, they educate those around them to use them safely, and they take them away from people who are mentally ill, who are right in the head.
Democrats and Republicans face off in primary elections, but the Libertarians find their candidate a little differently. Over the summer, Indiana's Libertarian Party nominated Tanya Millis, a real estate broker from Mitchell. And this is the second time she's ran for the 9th District, and she's advocating for rolling back federal rules and regulations. She's pro-gun and pro-life, but we talked a little about the holes in Indiana's abortion law. Why you decided to run for the 9th District again?
I got tired of yelling at the TV. The two-party system is broken. And I was a lifelong Republican, and now I'm a Libertarian, which means I'm a constitutionalist. And our founding fathers absolutely did not want a two-party system, a two-party monopoly that we call the duopoly. And even John Adams had wrote that was one of the things that he dreaded, that our republic would become a two-party system.
What do you think right now is the biggest issue facing voters in the 9th District?
Right now, the biggest issue is inflation, gas prices, price of food. Our national debt just went up to $31 trillion. That means you, your neighbor's kids, each and every one of us owe $93,000 of that debt. That's your debt.
I do want to turn now to some more issue-specific topics. The first being abortion. This summer, Roe v. Wade was overturned. Do you think abortion is a national issue that Congress should address?
Again, I'm a constitutionalist, and I do favor the way it was written as far as states' rights, because our founding fathers wanted certain things to go to the heart of the people and be decided by the people. And the closest to the people are the state representatives at the state level. And I know it does seem confusing when you have one state doing one thing and another state doing another, but eventually some of the states, they come together. Like, for example, with marijuana. Now we've got 37, 38 states that support marijuana use or cannabis products. Indiana's in the minority on that. But I am pro-life, but I also don't think that Big Brother in Washington, D.C. should be getting in little sister's business, or little brother's business for that matter.
More specific to Indiana, I know it's a state politic issue, but do you have any thoughts, or do you support Indiana's abortion ban, a near total ban?
The way the law was written, it needs to be revised. It was rushed through, and there's a lot of problems with it, because even though they say abortion is approved for the life of the mother, or if the baby is not viable, it's going to be very, very hard to find an OBGYN doctor that is willing to risk losing their license, because there's so many gray areas. So that makes it difficult for women, and then they would have, if their life is at risk, they still may have to go across state lines to save their own life. And so the law is flawed in many ways.
Turning now to the Second Amendment and gun control. Just some stats coming from the Gun Violence Archive. 519 mass shootings this year, 1,200 accidental shootings, more than 1,000 children or teenagers killed this year from guns. More than half of the gun deaths this year have been suicide. Does America have a problem with gun violence?
I think our country has a problem with mental health and also drug abuse. I'm a Second Amendment rights person. I think the Second Amendment was there to protect the First Amendment, and the right of the people to bear arms shall not be infringed, period. But I do think there's a problem when so many young men don't think they have a way out of the troubles that they're in, and they go on mass shootings and well, you know, the tragic stories that we hear, especially in children's schools. We need to do a better job with helping these people before they get so troubled that they turn to violence.
Well, Joe, those are the candidates for the 9th District, and they come from a variety of backgrounds, and no matter how the election turns out, the people of southeastern Indiana will have a new representative in Washington in January.
That's right.
For the full interviews, you can go to WTIU.org.
Thanks so much, Holden. And of course, we'll have sit-down interviews with candidates for the Secretary of State and U.S. Senator over the next 2 weeks. The college basketball preseason polls came out this week and have the IU men ranked 13th, the women at number 11. It was the first time the Hoosier men have been ranked in the preseason since 2016. They've also been picked to win the Big Ten.
When I was in school as a player, I never bought in to the rankings and, you know, what the media would say about our ball club. You still got to go out and play the game.
Being ranked is nothing new for the women. They've been in the top 25 in 58 straight polls. That's the end of this program. Our work continues online as we cover the news throughout the week at WTIUnews.org. Have a great weekend.
Indiana Newsdesk is made possible in part by Smithville Fiber Internet, streaming TV, home security and automation in Southern Indiana. More information at smithville.com. Maller Grodner Attorneys, providing legal services to clients and the community. Understanding, expertise, results. Bloomington and Indianapolis. LawMG.com. IU Alumni Association, connecting IU's network of alumni and sharing the Indiana spirit through scholarships, advocacy, and volunteerism. Alumni.iu.edu. IU Center for Rural Engagement, extending IU Bloomington resources to improve Hoosier lives in partnership with communities and organizations. Rural.indiana.edu. And by WTIU members. Thank you.